Leo was 65 when he first felt it, a strange heaviness in his legs as he climbed the stairs to his apartment. He'd been a teacher for nearly 40 years, the kind of man who never rushed, who found joy in small routines. His days now were filled with tending to his little balcony garden, visiting the library, and enjoying quiet dinners with his wife, Anne. But that evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, he reached the top of the stairs and had to stop, gripping the railing longer than he expected. His breath came slowly, and for the first time, he wondered if something inside him was quietly changing. A few weeks later, it happened again, only this time he wasn't climbing stairs. He was simply getting out of bed. His knees felt stiff, his calves weak, as though they had been quietly drained of strength during the night. He rubbed them absent-mindedly, telling himself it was probably just the weather, or perhaps he'd been sitting too long the day before. But deep down, there was a faint unease, a question he didn't want to put into words. What if my body is starting to give out on me? The real shock came one Saturday morning when he met his old friend Daniel for coffee. Daniel, once a fellow teacher and hiking partner, leaned in and said, "You've lost a lot of muscle, Leo. I can see it in your arms." It was said gently, without judgment, but the words landed like stones. Leo glanced down at his own forearm, the veins more visible, the skin looser than he remembered. It wasn't vanity that hurt him, it was the sudden awareness that strength, something he had taken for granted his entire life, might be slipping away for good. A week later, Leo decided to visit his doctor. Dr. Patel, a kind man in his 70s who had known Leo for years, listened patiently. "Leo, this is more common than you think. After 60, muscle loss speeds up. It's called sarcopenia, and it doesn't just happen while you're active, it happens while you sleep." That last part stayed with Leo long after he left the clinic. While he slept, he had always imagined sleep as a time for repair and healing, but now the thought that his body could be quietly breaking down while he rested made him uneasy in a way he hadn't felt before. That night, Leo lay in bed, unable to fall asleep. The moonlight spilled across the room, and Anne's soft breathing beside him was the only sound. He thought about the doctor's words, about how the muscles that once carried him through long walks in the countryside and hours of gardening could, in the quiet of night, be shrinking without his knowledge. He pictured himself in a few years, struggling to carry groceries, maybe unable to climb those stairs at all. The image made his chest tighten, not from fear of death, but from the thought of losing the independence he cherished. The next morning, he made a quiet decision. If his body was going to try to fade in the dark, then he would meet it head-on. He didn't know exactly how yet, but he would learn. He would not sit by and watch his strength dissolve into the shadows of sleep. This wasn't about trying to be young again. It was about holding on to what still mattered: mobility, dignity, the simple pleasure of moving without pain. His first step was talking to Anne. She had always been his partner in every journey, and he trusted her more than anyone. Over breakfast, he told her about Dr. Patel's explanation, about sarcopenia, about the strange truth that muscles need fuel even while we sleep. She listened carefully, nodding. "Then we'll find a way to feed them," she said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Her certainty made him feel lighter. Together, they began reading, searching through articles and journals, listening to interviews with specialists. That's when Leo discovered something he had never considered before: that the hours before bed might be just as important for muscle health as exercise itself. He learned that the body doesn't just go still at night, it becomes a quiet battlefield between breakdown and repair. And if you enter that battlefield without the right ammunition, you lose ground, night after night. He thought back to all the evenings he had spent with nothing more than a cup of tea before bed. Sometimes he even skipped dinner if he wasn't hungry. It had never occurred to him that his body might be starving for protein during those long hours of sleep, that instead of repairing, his muscles might be scavenging themselves for fuel. No wonder the mornings felt stiffer lately. No wonder climbing stairs felt like lifting lead. The realization hit him harder than he expected. It wasn't just time that had been chipping away at his strength, it was habit. The quiet choices he made every night without thinking. And if that was true, then maybe the reverse was also true. Maybe a small, intentional change could slow or even stop the loss. Maybe he could wake up stronger instead of weaker. It was an oddly hopeful thought. He imagined going to bed not as a slow drift toward decline, but as a nightly opportunity, a chance to give his body exactly what it needed to repair itself while he dreamed. He imagined walking into the kitchen in the evening with purpose, choosing something that would feed him through the night, like a gift he was leaving for tomorrow's Leo. That night, for the first time, he made a simple change. A small bowl of cottage cheese with a few slices of banana, eaten slowly as the kitchen light warmed the room. It felt almost ceremonial, this quiet act of preparation for sleep. He wasn't sure if he would notice anything in the morning, but as he rinsed the bowl and turned off the light, he felt a flicker of satisfaction, like he had taken back a little bit of control. The next morning, when he swung his legs over the side of the bed, something felt different. It wasn't dramatic. He wasn't suddenly bounding up the stairs, but there was a steadiness in his legs, a looseness in his joints. He stood there for a moment, testing the feeling, and then he smiled. It was small, but it was something. Leo knew this was only the beginning. He knew there would be more to learn about which foods truly worked, about how to time them, about how to keep his body repairing instead of breaking down. But he also knew one thing with certainty. The nights ahead would no longer be silent thieves of his strength. He was going to meet them prepared. In the days that followed, Leo found himself watching his evenings with new eyes. He began to notice patterns he'd never cared about before. How often he skipped a real dinner, how many nights ended with nothing but a cup of tea and a biscuit, how easily he drifted into sleep without a thought for what his body might need while he rested. Before Dr. Patel's words, those habits felt harmless. Now they felt like leaving the front door wide open, trusting that nothing in the dark would come in. He tried to push the thought aside, telling himself not to be paranoid, but the image of that cane-wielding man on the street stayed with him, as did the memory of his own father in his later years, struggling to get out of a chair, leaning heavily on the table just to stand. Back then, Leo had chalked it up to old age, the way everyone did, but now he wondered, had the slow theft begun years earlier, unnoticed, as his father slept night after night? One evening, he sat at the kitchen table while Anne chopped vegetables for their supper. The sound of her knife on the cutting board was steady, rhythmic. "You know," he said quietly, "it's strange. I've spent my whole life thinking about how to be healthy in the day. Walking, gardening, eating well. But I've never thought about what my body needs at night." "Not really." Anne glanced up from her chopping. "Most people don't," she said. "We think rest is enough, but maybe for you now it's not." Her words settled on him like a quiet truth. Rest wasn't enough anymore. He needed to give his body more than just hours of sleep. He needed to give it fuel, protection, maybe even a fighting chance to repair instead of decline. But the idea still felt overwhelming. He didn't know what that looked like. Should he eat more at dinner, snack before bed, drink something special? He hated the thought of guesswork when it came to his health. That night, unable to sleep, he sat by the window, watching the streetlights cast their pale glow on the empty road. He thought about his younger years, how easily he'd recover from anything, a long hike, a day of heavy lifting, even the flu. Back then, his body had been a silent partner that worked with him without question. Now it felt like that partner had gone quiet, maybe even started working against him. And yet, he couldn't bring himself to feel angry. It wasn't betrayal, it was just time, moving as it always had. But even time, he thought, could be met halfway. If the years were going to take from him, maybe he could still slow their hand. Maybe there was a way to greet each morning without feeling just a little bit weaker than the one before. The next day, he called Dr. Patel's office again, asking for a follow-up visit. When he arrived, the doctor greeted him warmly, then listened as Leo explained how the idea of muscle loss during sleep had kept gnawing at him. Dr. Patel nodded. "I understand," he said. "You're not alone in this. Most people don't realize how much nighttime nutrition matters, especially after 60. The body doesn't process protein the same way it used to. Without enough, and without it at the right time, muscles begin breaking down to fuel the rest of the body while you sleep." Leo leaned forward. "So what do I do? Just eat a steak at midnight?" The doctor smiled. "Not quite, but there are certain foods, easy, gentle, and rich in the right kind of protein, that can protect your muscles through the night. We'll go through them. What matters most is that you make this part of your nightly rhythm, like brushing your teeth. You don't skip it because the cost of skipping is too high." Walking home, Leo felt a curious mix of relief and anticipation. For the first time in weeks, the problem no longer felt like a looming shadow. It felt like something he could face, something that had an answer. He just needed to learn it, and once he did, he'd never again go to bed unprepared. That evening, he stood in the kitchen as the light outside began to fade, thinking about what Dr. Patel had said. He opened the fridge and scanned its contents. Leftover pasta, a carton of eggs, a tub of yogurt. None of it seemed to carry the quiet promise he was looking for. But he knew he was close to finding it. The first step was understanding the enemy, because now, in his mind, the nighttime wasn't simply a stretch of rest. It was a long corridor his body had to walk through, alone until morning. And in that corridor, the muscle thief waited, patient, invisible, taking what it could from anyone who entered empty-handed. Leo had no intention of entering empty-handed ever again. Leo had always thought of sleep as a blessing, the body's quiet workshop where invisible hands repaired the wear and tear of the day. So when Dr. Patel explained that his muscles were actually shrinking while he slept, the idea felt upside down. It was like learning that the roof you thought was sheltering you was, in fact, slowly leaking every night. The more he thought about it, the more it unsettled him. The doctor had used a term, catabolism, but quickly softened it for Leo. "Think of it like this," he'd said, resting his hands on his desk. "At night, your body goes into a fasting state. You stop eating for 7, 8, maybe 9 hours. If you haven't given your muscles enough fuel before that fast begins, your body starts looking for other sources of energy. And unfortunately, muscle is a very convenient source." That was the part Leo couldn't stop replaying in his head. His own muscles, the ones he had spent a lifetime using, maintaining, and taking for granted, were quietly being used as fuel just to keep his body running while he slept. It was like burning pieces of your own house to keep warm. The thought made him uneasy in a deep, almost personal way. He noticed now how different his body felt in the mornings. He had always chalked up the stiffness in his back or the heaviness in his legs to just getting older. But now he began to wonder if those aches weren't simply the result of time, but of the silent work happening in the night. If his muscles were being broken down instead of built up, then each morning was the result of a small loss, one that compounded over months and years. Anne could see that his thoughts had turned inward. Over tea one morning, she asked him gently, "What's bothering you most about it? The muscle loss itself, or the idea that it's happening when you're not even aware of it?" He thought for a moment. "Both," he admitted, "but maybe more the second. I don't like feeling powerless." That word, powerless, stuck with him for the rest of the day. It was a strange twist. He had always assumed that the best thing he could do for his health was to stay active during the day, to move, to walk, to keep his muscles engaged. Now he was beginning to see that what he did in the last hour before bed might be just as important as what he did in the morning. The problem, as Dr. Patel explained, was that after 60, the body doesn't use protein as efficiently as it once did. This was something Leo had never considered. "It's called anabolic resistance," the doctor said. "It means you need more protein, and often better timing, to get the same muscle-building effect you used to get naturally." That sentence alone had changed the way Leo looked at his evenings. He began to think back over the years, the nights when he'd skip dinner because he wasn't hungry, the evenings when a light soup or a sandwich seemed like enough, the countless cups of tea before bed. Comforting, yes, but hardly the kind of nourishment his muscles needed to make it through the long, empty hours ahead. He began to see these moments not as harmless habits, but as opportunities missed. One night, he sat with Anne on the couch, a book resting open in his lap. "It's like my muscles are going into battle every night," he said, "and I've been sending them in with no armor." Anne smiled faintly. "Then we give them armor," she replied. Simple as that. She always had a way of cutting through his spiraling thoughts to the heart of the matter, but the truth was, he didn't know what that armor looked like yet. That's when Dr. Patel's voice came back to him. "The key is to give your body a slow, steady supply of the right nutrients, especially protein, that lasts through the night." He imagined it like a campfire. If you only tossed on paper and twigs, it would flare up and die quickly. But if you added a thick, slow-burning log, the fire would last until morning. It made sense, suddenly. The problem wasn't just that he was going to bed without enough fuel, it was that the fuel he might have been eating didn't last. He could have eaten something light, quick to digest, hours before sleep, and by the time midnight came, his body would already be looking for another source of energy, and too often, that source was his own muscle. The next morning, he decided to test a simple idea. He didn't yet know the perfect foods for nighttime, but he figured he could at least start with something protein-rich later in the evening. He made himself a small omelet with cheese around 9 p.m., just an hour before bed. It wasn't heavy, but it felt more substantial than his usual tea and biscuit. As he lay in bed afterward, he imagined that omelet slowly feeding his muscles, keeping them from the quiet dismantling he now pictured so vividly. He couldn't swear he felt different the next morning. Not yet. But he did notice something subtle. When he stood up out of bed, his legs felt a touch steadier. His steps toward the kitchen were a little surer. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to keep him curious. Over the next few days, Leo found himself reading more about the science of muscle preservation in older adults. He learned that the loss of muscle wasn't just about strength, it was about everything. Balance, coordination, metabolism, even the ability to recover from illness, all tied back to maintaining lean muscle mass. The idea that it could all be quietly eroded during sleep made him more determined than ever to protect it. That week, he began thinking of bedtime differently. It wasn't just the closing of the day anymore, it was a moment to prepare, to set the stage for the hours ahead. He began seeing the pre-bed routine as a kind of ritual, not in a dramatic way, but as a quiet promise to himself that he wouldn't go into those long hours empty-handed. And though he didn't yet know the exact foods Dr. Patel would recommend, he was ready to learn, ready to arm himself for the night. Because now he no longer saw sleep as a neutral space. He saw it for what it could be, either the slow erosion of his strength or a quiet workshop where his body could rebuild. The difference between the two, he realized, was entirely in his hands. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when Leo finally realized that the real problem wasn't simply aging. He had heard that explanation too many times in his life. His father's generation had accepted it without question. If your legs grew weak, if you tired easily, if you lost muscle, well, that was just what happened after 60. But now, sitting in his armchair with the rain drumming against the window, Leo understood something different. Age wasn't the true culprit. It was only the cover under which the real thief worked. The real culprit, he now believed, was neglect. But not the kind you could see in the mirror. It was the quiet neglect of not giving his body what it needed before sleep. It was the small, invisible decisions he had made night after night, not realizing they were opening the door for decline. Like leaving the garden gate unlatched, not much happened the first night or the second. But over time, the weeds took root, the flowers wilted, and the change became impossible to ignore. This truth hit him while he was watching an old documentary about mountaineers. One climber explained how the most dangerous threats were often invisible. The slow depletion of oxygen, the gradual freezing of fingers in a glove. The body could endure for hours without showing obvious signs of damage, but by the time the symptoms appeared, the harm was already deep. That was what was happening to him. His strength wasn't disappearing in a loud, dramatic way. It was fading in whispers. That evening, he told Anne what he had been thinking. She was drying dishes at the sink, her hands moving in a slow rhythm. "It's strange," he said, "but I think I've been blaming the wrong thing. I keep saying it's my age, but really, I've been going to bed unprepared for years." She looked over her shoulder and smiled gently. "That's how it happens, love. You don't realize what's missing until it's been missing for a long time." Her words brought him back to when they were first married, when money was tight. They'd learned quickly that skipping small essentials, a good pair of shoes, a proper winter coat, didn't just save money, it cost them later. He remembered one particularly harsh winter when he had walked for weeks in worn-out boots. His feet were never warm, and by February he had developed a stubborn cough from the cold. The cost of those savings had been far greater than buying the boots in the first place. Now, decades later, the same principle was true for his health. Skipping the right nourishment before bed wasn't saving him from anything. It was costing him quietly every single night. The more he thought about it, the clearer it became. This silent culprit wasn't just about skipping food before bed. It was about misunderstanding what his body needed now versus what it had needed when he was younger. Back then, he could eat a late lunch, skip dinner entirely, and still wake up feeling fine. His younger body could draw from deep reserves, repairing itself without much help. But those reserves weren't bottomless. Now they were thinner, fragile. They needed refilling. Later that week, Leo met Dr. Patel again. The doctor listened patiently, nodding as Leo described this new understanding. "That's exactly it," Dr. Patel said. "You're not fighting age itself. You're fighting the choices that age makes more costly. At 25, you could skip a meal and recover without a thought. At 65, the same choice has a completely different impact." Leo leaned back in his chair. So you're saying the enemy isn't just time, it's the way time changes the rules of the game, Dr. Patel smiled. Precisely. And most people never realize the rules have changed until it's far too late. On his walk home, Leo thought about how easily he could have gone on believing the old story, that weakness was inevitable, that nothing he did could change it. It was a comfortable belief in a way. They'd asked nothing of him, but it also offered no hope. And now that he knew the truth, he couldn't go back to that comfort. That night, as he and Anne prepared for bed, he stood in the kitchen a little longer than usual. He opened the fridge and thought about the foods inside in a new way. They weren't just snacks or leftovers anymore. They were tools. Some would work quietly through the night, protecting him. Others would do nothing at all. Anne came in, her hair brushed back for sleep, and leaned against the doorway. "Thinking about your nighttime thief again?" she asked with a smile. "I'm thinking," he said slowly, "that I'm ready to stop inviting him in." The rain had stopped outside, leaving the air cool and still. As Leo climbed into bed, he felt different, not stronger, not yet, but aware. Aware of the hours ahead, of the silent work his body would be doing, of the choices he could make to shape that work. And awareness, he realized, was the first step in taking back what had been slipping away. From now on, the silent culprit would no longer be hidden in the shadows. He had a name for it now, and he had a plan forming in his mind. The next step was learning the exact foods and habits that could turn those long hours of sleep into a time of renewal instead of loss. The thought filled him with something he hadn't felt in months: quiet determination. It was one thing to know what was happening, and another thing entirely to know how to stop it. That was the thought running through Leo's mind the morning he sat at the kitchen table with a notepad, the light from the window pooling across the page. The words "overnight breakdown" sat at the top, underlined twice. He felt like a detective staring at a case he'd been trying to solve for months. Only this case was happening inside his own body. Dr. Patel's advice echoed in his mind. You need to feed your muscles before bed, not just fill your stomach. Give them something they can draw from all night. The doctor had compared it to fueling a car for a long drive. If you started with an empty tank, it didn't matter how good your engine was, you'd stall before reaching your destination. The destination, in this case, was morning. For years, Leo had never considered timing as part of nutrition. He'd always thought food was food. Eat it when you're hungry, stop when you're full. But now, the timing felt just as important as what he ate. He imagined his muscles settling in for the night like factory workers starting a shift. If they weren't supplied with the right materials before the shift began, the work would stop, and the factory would start dismantling itself just to keep the lights on. That evening after dinner, he told Anne, "I want to try something different tonight. Not just tea or fruit. I want to give this nighttime thing a proper test." She nodded without hesitation. "Then let's make it special," she said, setting her cutting board on the counter. Not a chore, a ritual. They decided to treat it almost like they were preparing for a small celebration. Anne brought out a small dish, the kind they used for serving desserts. She suggested starting with something mild, gentle on the stomach, but packed with the kind of slow-digesting protein Dr. Patel had talked about. "Cottage cheese," she said simply. "I know you're not crazy about it, but it's worth trying." Leo hesitated. Cottage cheese wasn't his favorite, but he trusted her. She added a few slices of banana for natural sweetness, then dusted it with a little cinnamon. "There," she said. "Better already." He took his first bite, expecting to tolerate it at best. But the banana softened the tang and the cinnamon added warmth. It wasn't something he'd crave, but it felt nourishing, substantial in a quiet way. As he ate, Anne explained what she'd read. That casein protein, found in cottage cheese, digests slowly over several hours, feeding the muscles throughout the night. "Think of it like a slow drip watering system for your garden," she said. "Instead of flooding it once and letting it dry out, it keeps things steady." That image stuck with him. When he went to bed that night, Leo felt oddly reassured. He pictured the food working its way through his body, sending small but steady streams of fuel to his muscles as the hours passed. For the first time, he didn't think of sleep as an empty stretch. He thought of it as a time when something good might actually be happening. The next morning, he rose slowly, testing himself as he stood. There was no miraculous surge of energy. He didn't expect one, but he noticed something subtle. His legs didn't feel quite as heavy. His shoulders rolled back more easily. Even his morning walk to the kitchen felt smoother. He wasn't sure if it was the food, the hope, or both, but it was enough to make him want to keep going. Over the next few nights, he experimented. One evening, he had a small omelet, another, a cup of plain Greek yogurt with a spoonful of berries. Each time, he paid close attention to how he felt the next morning. He began noticing patterns. The heavier, protein-rich foods seemed to leave him feeling steadier when he woke, less prone to that strange, early morning weakness that had bothered him for so long. He realized that this wasn't just about food, it was about reclaiming a part of his life that had felt out of his control. For months, maybe years, he'd been waking each morning a little weaker without knowing why. Now, every night felt like an opportunity to turn that tide. One evening, he met Daniel, the friend who had first pointed out his muscle loss, for coffee. They talked about books, the weather, the small changes in their routines. Finally, Leo leaned forward and said, "You know how you told me I looked like I'd lost muscle? I think I figured out part of the problem. It's the nights." Daniel frowned. The nights? Leo explained what Dr. Patel had told him, how the body scavenges muscle for fuel if it doesn't have enough, and how he'd started eating protein before bed. Daniel listened intently, then laughed softly. "I've been doing the opposite," he admitted. "I have a big lunch, light dinner, and nothing before bed. Maybe I've been starving my muscles all night without realizing it." That conversation stayed with Leo. It reminded him that most people his age were walking around with the same quiet problem, never knowing there might be an answer. And that answer wasn't complicated. It was simple enough to fit on a small dessert plate. By the end of that first week, the nighttime ritual no longer felt experimental. It felt necessary, not in a burdensome way, but in the way brushing his teeth felt necessary. A habit that, if skipped, left him uneasy. He had begun to understand that stopping overnight breakdown wasn't a one-time fix. It was an ongoing act of care, repeated every evening, like a promise to himself. And perhaps most importantly, it was working its way into his identity. Leo was no longer just someone losing muscle. He was someone protecting it. The subtle shift in language mattered to him. It made each choice feel less like a desperate reaction and more like a deliberate act of living well. One night, as he rinsed his small dish and set it in the sink, he thought about how much had changed in just a short time. The muscle thief was still out there, waiting in the shadows of sleep, but now Leo wasn't going into the night defenseless. He had learned the first step in fighting back. Give your body the right kind of fuel at the right time, and it would protect you in return. Leo had never thought much about habits before. He knew the saying, old habits die hard, but he had always assumed that his routines were just the way things were. But now, after a few weeks of his new nighttime ritual, he was beginning to see habits in a new light. Not as fixed patterns, but as small choices made over and over, each one building or breaking the strength he wanted to protect. It was a quiet Sunday morning when Leo first noticed something different. He woke up and swung his legs over the side of the bed without the usual hesitation. For years, getting up had felt like lifting a weight he couldn't see, a slow, stubborn resistance in his knees and calves. But this morning there was a lightness, a surprising ease. He stood up and stretched, feeling the muscles in his legs respond without that familiar ache. He told Anne at breakfast, "I don't know if it's the cottage cheese or the yogurt, or maybe just the hope, but I feel better, just a little." She smiled warmly. "It's not just hope, Leo. Your body is telling you it's getting the fuel it needs." That small shift sparked a new confidence in him. For the first time in months, Leo looked forward to mornings, curious to see how he would feel rather than dreading the stiffness that greeted him. He found himself taking longer walks in the neighborhood, feeling the crunch of leaves beneath his shoes, the fresh air filling his lungs. His steps were steadier, his balance more sure. One afternoon, he visited the community center where a gentle exercise class for seniors met weekly. He'd been hesitant to join before, worried he wouldn't keep up. But that day, buoyed by his improved mornings, he stayed for the full session. He was surprised to find that his muscles felt more responsive, less prone to that tightness that used to slow him down. The small habit of feeding his muscles before bed was beginning to ripple into other parts of his life. Leo's doctor noticed the change too. At his next appointment, Dr. Patel reviewed his muscle strength tests with a smile. "Leo, your numbers are improving," he said. "It's remarkable how a simple change in your nighttime nutrition has made such a difference. Your muscles are responding well to the extra fuel." Leo felt a quiet pride swell inside him. It wasn't about looking strong or impressing others, it was about reclaiming something personal. The ability to move freely, to feel steady on his feet, to wake each day ready for whatever it might bring. He began to understand that these small nightly choices were not just about preventing loss. They were about creating gain. Each evening's bowl of cottage cheese, each spoonful of yogurt was like a deposit in a strength bank that paid dividends come morning. That realization made him more mindful throughout the day as well. He started paying attention to his overall diet, making sure he ate balanced meals with enough protein, fruits, and vegetables. He drank water regularly, avoiding the dehydration that often left him feeling sluggish. Even his sleep improved. The tiredness that had plagued his nights, the tossing and turning, the waking up too early, began to ease. He felt more rested, less stiff, more ready to embrace the day. The muscle loss that had once felt like an unstoppable tide was slowing, giving way to something steadier, stronger. Leo shared his journey with friends and family, encouraging them gently to consider their own nighttime routines. Some were skeptical at first, but many noticed similar benefits when they tried simple additions to their evenings. It became a quiet community effort, a way to take back control from the hidden forces of aging. One evening, as Leo sat reading, Anne brought him a cup of warm golden milk, a new addition to their ritual she had discovered. "This has turmeric and spices," she said. "It's supposed to help with inflammation and sleep." He sipped it slowly, feeling the warmth spread through him, imagining the healing work it might do overnight. He smiled, thinking back to that first night of cottage cheese and banana. The journey was just beginning, but already small habits were making a big difference. Leo felt hopeful, not just for himself, but for all the quiet fighters out there reclaiming their strength one night at a time. Leo never thought a simple food like cottage cheese could become such a quiet hero in his journey. Yet, after a few nights of trying it before bed, he was beginning to understand why Dr. Patel had recommended it so strongly. It wasn't fancy or flashy, but it carried something vital, a slow, steady supply of nourishment his muscles craved while he slept. That evening, Anne brought out a small bowl filled halfway with cottage cheese. She added a few thin slices of banana, a sprinkle of cinnamon, and just a light drizzle of honey. "I read that bananas give potassium," she said. "It helps muscles relax and recover." Leo smiled, appreciating the care she took in making it more palatable. As he took his first bite, he noticed the creamy texture and gentle sweetness, a quiet comfort after a long day. More than that, he felt like he was doing something important, feeding his muscles in a way he had never considered. It was a small act, but it carried a sense of hope. He recalled Dr. Patel's explanation. Cottage cheese contains casein protein, which digests slowly over several hours. Unlike the quick burst of energy from whey protein or sugary snacks, casein provided a steady drip of amino acids, the building blocks his muscles needed to repair and grow during the long hours of sleep. Leo began to think of his muscles as plants in a garden, thirsty through the night, needing a constant supply of water rather than a flood. The cottage cheese was that slow drip, keeping the roots alive and strong while the rest of the body rested. The next morning, Leo awoke with a noticeable difference. His legs felt less stiff, his joints moved more smoothly. The heaviness that usually greeted him was lighter, almost gone. He wasn't sure if it was the cottage cheese alone, but it was enough to encourage him to continue. In the days that followed, he kept the habit. Half a cup of cottage cheese, a few slices of banana, or a sprinkle of cinnamon, eaten about 30 to 60 minutes before bedtime. Some nights he added chia seeds Anne had recommended. They brought healthy fats and fiber, helping digestion and keeping him full without discomfort. Leo found that this routine settled him. The act of preparing the bowl, savoring it slowly, gave him a moment of peace before sleep. It became a ritual, a way to connect with his body, to honor its needs rather than ignore them. He learned that cottage cheese also contained tryptophan, an amino acid that helped produce melatonin and serotonin, the hormones that eased his mind and invited restful sleep. It was as if the food not only fed his muscles, but also cradled his nervous system, guiding him gently into a deep, healing rest. One afternoon, Leo shared his new discovery with his neighbor, Mrs. Nguyen, a woman in her 70s who often struggled with joint pain. "You should try it," he said, describing how cottage cheese helped him feel steadier in the morning. She smiled, intrigued. "I'll give it a go," she said. "Anything that helps me move without pain is worth trying." As more days passed, Leo noticed a pattern. The mornings he had cottage cheese the night before were always better. He woke up with more energy, less stiffness, a readiness to face the day. The muscles in his legs and arms felt stronger, less prone to the aches that had plagued him. This small habit, once unfamiliar, was becoming the foundation of his strength. It reminded him that sometimes the simplest changes carried the greatest power. It wasn't about dramatic workouts or expensive supplements. It was about honoring the quiet needs of his body during its most vulnerable hours. One evening, Anne surprised him with a new twist: cottage cheese mixed with a few berries and a dash of vanilla extract. "It's like a dessert," she said with a laugh. Leo enjoyed the change, grateful for the variety that kept the ritual fresh and enjoyable. He thought back to the first night he tried cottage cheese, unsure if he could eat it regularly. Now it was a comforting part of his routine, a nightly gift to himself that promised renewal by morning. Leo realized that this small, slow-drip protein was more than food. It was a symbol of his commitment to fight the nighttime muscle thief. Every spoonful was a step away from decline and a step toward strength, one quiet night at a time. Leo had always admired eggs for their simplicity, a humble breakfast staple, easy to prepare and satisfying to eat. But it wasn't until recently that he discovered just how powerful those little ovals truly were, especially for someone his age trying to hold on to strength. One morning, after his routine checkup, Dr. Patel mentioned eggs during their conversation. "Leo, eggs are packed with complete protein," he said. "They have all 9 essential amino acids your muscles need to repair and grow. What makes them special for older adults is their high leucine content." Leo frowned, trying to recall if he'd heard of leucine before. "What does leucine do?" he asked. "It's an amino acid that acts like a signal to your muscles," the doctor explained. "It tells them to start building, to start repairing damage. As we age, muscles become less sensitive to this signal, so we need more leucine to trigger growth. Eggs are a natural, effective source." That afternoon, Leo walked to the local market, thinking about how he could incorporate eggs into his evening routine. He bought a dozen, choosing the freshest he could find. The next night, he tried hard-boiled eggs. Simple, no fuss. He peeled one slowly, remembering the doctor's words as he ate. It felt like a small but meaningful gesture toward his health. The taste was familiar but comforting. More than that, Leo felt a quiet reassurance in knowing he was giving his muscles the fuel and signals they needed. It wasn't about eating a lot, 1 or 2 eggs before bed were enough. The idea that such a small change could have a big impact encouraged him. Over the next few weeks, Leo noticed subtle but important changes. His mornings became less stiff, his balance improved, and tasks that once required effort, like carrying groceries or climbing stairs, felt easier. He told Anne, "I think the eggs are helping. Not just the protein, it feels like my muscles are waking up again." Anne smiled. "It's amazing how something so simple can make such a difference." One evening, Leo prepared a small plate of 2 hard-boiled eggs, sprinkled lightly with black pepper and a dash of turmeric, a combination Anne had read about for reducing inflammation. They ate together, enjoying the ritual and the shared commitment to his well-being. Leo thought about how his body had changed over the years, how it once responded effortlessly to movement and food, and how now it needed more care, more intention. The eggs were part of that care, a daily reminder that he was fighting back against decline. He remembered his father, who had never paid attention to such details. If only he had known, Leo thought, if only someone had told him that strength could be preserved with simple choices. That thought gave him purpose. He began sharing what he'd learned with friends at the community center, encouraging them to try eggs before bed. Some were skeptical, but many were willing to try. Leo's story gave them hope, proof that age didn't have to mean surrender. As the weeks passed, Leo's confidence grew. He found new energy for his morning walks, for his garden, and for simple pleasures like playing chess with Anne or reading in the sun. The hard-boiled eggs had become a quiet but powerful part of his nightly routine. He understood now that maintaining muscle wasn't about quick fixes or drastic changes. It was about consistent, small steps taken with care and intention. Each egg he ate before bed was a signal, a message to his muscles that he wasn't done yet. One chilly evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Leo sat by the window, reflecting on his journey. The path had been unexpected and humbling, but also empowering. He wasn't just surviving his age, he was learning to thrive within it, and that made all the difference. Leo had never been much of a fish person. As a young man, he preferred the familiar comforts of meat and vegetables, the kind of meals his mother made that felt like home. But as he journeyed deeper into understanding how to protect his strength, he began to appreciate the quiet power hidden in some unexpected foods. Tuna packed in olive oil quickly became one of those surprises. It started during a conversation with Anne as they planned their meals for the week. "I read that tuna is rich in protein and healthy fats, especially when it's packed in olive oil," she said. "It helps muscles stay fueled all night long." Leo raised an eyebrow. "Sounds fancy," he joked, "but I'm willing to try." That evening, they opened a small can of tuna preserved in golden olive oil. Anne flaked it gently onto a plate, adding thin slices of cucumber for freshness and a squeeze of lemon to brighten the flavors. Leo took his first bite, surprised by the combination's richness. The oil was smooth, the tuna tender. It wasn't just food, it felt like a small feast crafted to nourish him deeply. Dr. Patel had explained that the omega-3 fatty acids in olive oil weren't just heart-healthy, they also slowed digestion. This slow release meant the amino acids from the tuna would drip-feed Leo's muscles throughout the night, much like the cottage cheese he had come to trust. It was a double benefit: high-quality protein paired with fats that ensured a steady supply. That night, as Leo settled into bed, he imagined his muscles being wrapped in a warm, protective blanket of nutrients, working quietly to rebuild and strengthen while he dreamed. The idea brought him comfort, a sense that he was actively participating in his own renewal even during rest. Over the next few mornings, Leo noticed a subtle but meaningful difference. His joints felt less stiff, and the soreness he sometimes felt after gardening was easing. He found himself moving with more confidence, the small improvements stacking into a noticeable change. One afternoon, while chatting with his friend Daniel, Leo shared the discovery. Daniel was skeptical at first. Fish wasn't his favorite either, but he trusted Leo's experience. Soon, the two were swapping tips about foods and routines, a quiet camaraderie born from shared struggles and small victories. Anne, always the thoughtful planner, suggested variations, adding whole grain crackers for a bit of crunch or a sprinkle of sea salt for flavor. They avoided heavy dressings or mayonnaise, knowing those could slow digestion too much and interfere with sleep. Leo felt grateful for these small but impactful changes. The once overwhelming mystery of muscle loss was becoming something manageable, something he could influence one meal at a time. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Leo reflected on how far he had come. He wasn't just reacting to decline, he was shaping his future. Each bite of tuna and olive oil was a deliberate step toward strength, a quiet rebellion against the passage of time. He smiled, thinking of the many seniors who might still be unaware of these simple yet powerful tools. If only they knew how accessible muscle preservation could be. No fancy supplements, no extreme diets, just thoughtful choices and consistent care. Leo's journey was far from over, but with each new habit, he felt more in control, more hopeful. The power combo of tuna and olive oil had become another trusted ally in his nightly ritual, a delicious way to protect what mattered most. And as the stars began to twinkle outside his window, Leo drifted into sleep, knowing he was nourishing not just his body, but his spirit as well. Leo had always enjoyed yogurt as a light snack, but it wasn't until recently that he discovered the special role Greek yogurt could play in his journey to preserve muscle and strength. Unlike regular yogurt, which he thought was just a sweet treat, Greek yogurt had quietly become one of the most powerful tools in his nighttime arsenal. One afternoon, while browsing the dairy section at the local market, Anne pointed to the thick tubs of Greek yogurt. "This one's richer in protein," she explained. "It's strained more times than regular yogurt, so it has less sugar and more muscle-friendly nutrients." Leo read the label carefully and noticed that it was dense and creamy, perfect for his nighttime snack. He bought a tub of plain, full-fat Greek yogurt, deciding to give it a try that very evening. After dinner, Leo stirred a small bowl of the yogurt, adding a handful of fresh berries Anne had picked up. The tartness of the berries balanced the creamy texture perfectly. He took his first spoonful and found it smooth and satisfying. It wasn't just food, it was nourishment that felt both comforting and purposeful. Dr. Patel had told him that Greek yogurt's slow-digesting casein protein worked through the night, delivering a steady stream of amino acids to his muscles. But it wasn't just protein. Greek yogurt was also rich in calcium, important for muscle contractions and bone health, and contained probiotics that supported digestion and inflammation control. Leo imagined his gut and muscles working together overnight, supported by these nutrients. The idea of his body quietly repairing itself while he slept was no longer a vague hope. It felt real and tangible. The next morning, Leo woke feeling refreshed. The usual stiffness in his knees was less pronounced, and his legs felt lighter. The small but noticeable difference encouraged him to make Greek yogurt a regular part of his evening routine. Over the next weeks, he experimented with variations, sometimes adding cinnamon, which Anne read helped reduce inflammation, or stirring in a teaspoon of chia seeds for extra fiber and omega-3 fats. Each addition felt like fine-tuning a symphony, bringing harmony to his body's nighttime repair process. His mornings became brighter, his steps steadier, and his confidence grew. Leo found himself looking forward to his nighttime snack, not just for the taste, but for the comfort it brought, knowing he was helping his muscles heal and grow. One evening, Leo shared his discovery with Mrs. Nguyen, who had recently mentioned struggling with muscle cramps. "Try Greek yogurt," he suggested warmly. "It's helped me feel less stiff in the mornings." She smiled, hopeful. "I'll give it a try," she said. "Anything that makes mornings easier is worth it." The ritual of preparing his snack became a moment of mindfulness for Leo. In the quiet kitchen, he paused to appreciate the simple pleasures: a bowl of creamy yogurt, the sweetness of berries, the gentle hum of the refrigerator. These small acts of care grounded him, reminding him that aging didn't mean surrendering to decline. Leo knew the journey wasn't just about food, it was about respect for his body, his routines, and the wisdom that came with experience. Greek yogurt wasn't a miracle cure, but it was a steadfast companion on the road to strength. He often thought about how these nighttime habits were slowly changing his mornings and his life. No longer did he wake with dread or hesitation. Instead, he greeted the day with a quiet strength, ready to move, to garden, to live fully. As he settled into bed that night, bowl empty and spirit full, Leo felt a deep sense of gratitude. He was nurturing not just his muscles, but his hope for the years ahead, and that hope made all the difference. Leo had never imagined a simple cup of warm milk could hold such power. But after weeks of small changes and careful listening to his body, he was beginning to understand that the gentlest rituals often had the deepest impact. When Anne suggested adding golden turmeric milk to his nightly routine, he was intrigued and a little skeptical. One chilly evening, as the sky turned soft shades of pink and gray, Anne prepared the golden milk with care. She warmed a cup of milk, not too hot, just comfortably warm, and stirred in a quarter teaspoon of ground turmeric, a dash of black pepper to help absorption, and a small drizzle of honey for sweetness. The warm aroma filled the kitchen, inviting calm and comfort. Leo took the cup in his hands, feeling the heat seep into his fingers. As he sipped, the flavors were mild but rich, a gentle warmth that spread through his chest and settled in his stomach. It was soothing, like a quiet embrace after a long day. Dr. Patel had explained that milk was already a nighttime nutritional powerhouse. It contained casein protein, which, like the cottage cheese Leo loved, released amino acids slowly throughout the night. Milk also provided calcium, important for muscle contractions and bone health, and vitamin D, which supported immune function and muscle strength. But adding turmeric brought something new, a natural anti-inflammatory compound called curcumin. Chronic low-grade inflammation was a hidden enemy that often accelerated muscle loss and joint discomfort in older adults. Turmeric, paired with the black pepper that helped his body absorb it, was like a tiny warrior fighting the silent battles inside Leo's body while he slept. That night, as Leo lay in bed, he felt a calmness that went beyond his usual relaxation. His muscles seemed less tense, his joints less achy. He imagined the golden milk flowing through his system, carrying healing compounds to every corner of his body. The next morning, Leo noticed he woke feeling less stiff than usual. The heaviness in his legs was reduced, and his movements were smoother. It wasn't a dramatic change, but it was enough to brighten his mood and strengthen his resolve. Over the following weeks, golden turmeric milk became a treasured part of Leo's nightly ritual. Some evenings, Anne substituted almond or oat milk, making sure it was fortified with calcium and protein to keep the benefits intact. Each variation felt like a new way to care for himself, a gentle reminder that he was not alone in this journey. Leo also learned that sleep was when his body released growth hormone, a key player in tissue repair and muscle regeneration. The golden milk supported this natural process, helping him get the deep, restorative rest that his muscles desperately needed. One day, while chatting with Mrs. Nguyen at the community center, Leo shared his new favorite bedtime drink. She listened carefully and promised to try it, hopeful that it might ease her own joint pain. This simple drink, he realized, was about more than nourishment. It was about rituals that soothed the mind and body, preparing both for the healing that came with rest. It was a way of honoring the quiet hours of the night, transforming them from a time of vulnerability into a time of strength. Leo felt gratitude for these moments of care. Each sip was a small act of kindness toward himself, a promise that he was worth the effort. And with each passing day, he found new reasons to believe that aging gracefully was possible, not through grand gestures, but through consistent, loving habits. As the sun dipped below the horizon and stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Leo sipped his golden turmeric milk with a peaceful heart. He knew the journey was ongoing, but with each small change, he was building a foundation that would carry him forward, night after night, towards stronger, healthier days ahead. Leo had never thought much about nuts or nut butters. They were snacks he associated with his younger days, quick energy on hiking trips or simple additions to lunchboxes. But as his journey to preserve muscle strength deepened, almond butter emerged as an unexpected but welcome companion in his nightly routine. One evening, after a quiet dinner, Anne brought out a small jar of natural almond butter. "This might be a nice change for your nighttime snack," she said with a smile. "It's full of healthy fats and plant-based protein, both great for keeping your muscles fueled while you sleep." Leo was curious. He spread a small spoonful onto a slice of whole grain toast, the creamy texture contrasting with the crunch of the bread. The taste was mild and comforting. It wasn't something he would have chosen on his own, but it fit perfectly into the peaceful ritual they were creating together. Dr. Patel had explained that almond butter provided monounsaturated fats, which helped slow digestion and stabilize blood sugar levels. This slow release of energy meant Leo's body wouldn't experience sudden spikes or crashes during the night, allowing his muscles a steady supply of fuel. Magnesium, also found in almonds, helped relax muscles and reduce nighttime cramps, a common concern for many seniors. Leo noticed how this nighttime snack made him feel more satiated, preventing those occasional restless nights when hunger would wake him. He appreciated how something so simple could ease a problem he had barely recognized. Over the following days, almond butter became a versatile staple. Sometimes he ate it plain, straight from the spoon. Other times, Anne paired it with apple slices or oat crackers. They avoided almond butters with added sugars or oils, sticking to natural, pure versions to preserve the health benefits. Leo also discovered that magnesium's calming effect helped quiet his mind before sleep. On nights when he felt anxious or restless, a small serving of almond butter seemed to soothe him, inviting a deeper, more restful sleep. His mornings gradually grew brighter. He found himself waking with less stiffness and more energy, ready to engage in his daily walks and garden work. The slow, steady fuel of almond butter complemented the other foods in his regimen, building a nutritional fortress that protected his muscles through the night. One afternoon, while chatting with a group at the community center, Leo shared the story of almond butter's role in his routine. A few were skeptical, unfamiliar with the idea of eating fats before bed, but many were intrigued enough to try. The ripple effect of his discoveries continued to grow. Leo felt grateful that such small, accessible changes could lead to meaningful improvements in his strength and well-being. As he sat by the window one evening, watching the soft glow of twilight, Leo reflected on his journey. He realized that the path to health was rarely about grand gestures or dramatic transformations. It was about patience, kindness to oneself, and the willingness to embrace new habits, one small step at a time. Almond butter, with its creamy texture and nourishing power, had become more than just a food. It was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the quiet moments before sleep, strength could be cultivated and preserved. And as Leo prepared for bed that night, spreading a modest spoonful on toast, he felt a deep sense of peace. He was nurturing his body, honoring its needs, and investing in the many tomorrows yet to come. Leo had heard of tart cherry juice before, but had never given it much thought. To him, it was just another trendy health drink, something his younger niece might sip after a workout. But as his nightly routine grew richer with carefully chosen foods, tart cherry juice emerged as a surprising yet powerful addition. It began when Anne came home with a small bottle of unsweetened tart cherry juice. "I read that it's packed with antioxidants and melatonin," she explained. "It can help reduce inflammation and improve sleep quality, two things that are really important for your muscles at night." Leo was intrigued but cautious. Drinking juice before bed was a new concept for him. Still, with Anne's encouragement, he poured a small glass one evening, noting the deep red color and sharp, tangy flavor. The taste was bold but refreshing, unlike the sweet juices he was used to. Dr. Patel had explained how tart cherries contain anthocyanins, plant compounds that fought oxidative stress and inflammation, silent enemies that chipped away at muscles and joints over time. Plus, the natural melatonin in the juice helped regulate sleep cycles, allowing for deeper, more restorative rest. Leo imagined his muscles bathed in this antioxidant-rich elixir as he drifted off to sleep. The idea of giving his body a fighting chance to heal overnight felt empowering. Within days, Leo began noticing subtle changes. The morning stiffness that had once greeted him was less severe, and he woke feeling more refreshed. His joints, especially his knees, felt less swollen and painful after his daily walks and gardening. One afternoon, Leo shared the juice with Mrs. Guyon, who had often complained about joint discomfort. "Try this," he said warmly. "It's helped me feel less sore in the mornings." She smiled and accepted the glass, hopeful that the tart juice might bring relief. Leo's evenings evolved to include this ritual, a small glass of tart cherry juice taken about 30 to 45 minutes before bed. It wasn't just the taste or the health benefits, it was the act of care, the way it marked the transition from day to night, from activity to rest. As the weeks passed, he found his sleep deepening. No longer did he wake multiple times or toss and turn in frustration. Instead, he sank into restful cycles that allowed his body to rebuild stronger. Leo also appreciated how tart cherry juice supported his mood. Better sleep meant clearer mornings, calmer thoughts, and more patience with the challenges of aging. He reflected on the journey, how something as simple as a nightly glass of tart cherry juice could influence so many aspects of his well-being. It was a reminder that health wasn't about complexity, it was about thoughtful choices made consistently. The juice had become more than a drink, it was a symbol of renewal, a partner in his quest to age gracefully and strongly. That night, as Leo lay in bed, the deep red warmth of tart cherry juice lingering in his mouth, he felt gratitude for the wisdom to learn, the strength to change, and the hope that every night brought a new opportunity for healing. Leo had never been one for shakes or smoothies. In his mind, they were drinks for athletes or young people trying to bulk up. But as he continued to explore ways to protect and rebuild his muscle, he became curious about what Dr. Patel called the nighttime whey protein shake, a powerful ally in muscle repair and growth. One afternoon, after his regular checkup, Dr. Patel handed Leo a small sample of whey protein isolate. "This is one of the fastest absorbing proteins," the doctor explained, "and it's especially rich in leucine, the amino acid that signals your muscles to grow. Taken before bed, it can boost overnight muscle protein synthesis significantly." Leo listened carefully, intrigued by the science but grateful for the doctor's simple explanations. He was ready to try something new, something that might accelerate the progress he had already started. That evening, Anne helped him prepare the shake. They mixed a scoop of whey protein with unsweetened almond milk, adding half a banana for sweetness and a pinch of cinnamon for warmth. The texture was smooth, the taste mild and pleasant. As Leo drank the shake, he thought about how far he had come, from ignoring his nighttime nutrition to embracing these thoughtful rituals. The shake felt like a small but mighty weapon against the gradual loss he feared. Over the next few nights, Leo noticed an increasing ease in his movements. His muscles felt more responsive, his energy more sustained throughout the day. The combination of high-quality protein and careful timing seemed to unlock a new level of recovery. One morning, after his walk through the park, Leo caught sight of himself in a shop window. He was surprised to see his posture had improved, straighter, more confident. His arms looked firmer, less sagging than before. It wasn't vanity, it was a sign that his body was responding to the care he was giving it. He shared his experience with friends at the community center, some of whom had been hesitant to try protein shakes. Leo assured them it wasn't complicated or unpleasant, just a simple addition to the evening routine that made a difference. Anne found joy in creating different variations of the shake, sometimes adding a spoonful of almond butter, other times blending in a few frozen berries. The ritual became a moment of connection, a shared commitment to health and vitality. Leo thought about how protein shakes had once seemed like something not for him, a world away from his quiet life. Now they were a vital tool in his fight to maintain strength and independence. He reflected on the science he'd learned, how leucine acted as a key, unlocking muscle-building machinery that slowed with age. The shake was like turning that key, signaling his muscles to rebuild, repair, and grow while he slept. That night, as he prepared his shake and settled into bed, Leo felt a renewed sense of hope. He knew aging would always bring challenges, but he also knew he had the power to influence how those challenges affected him. Each sip was a promise, to himself, to his body, and to the many tomorrows he hoped to enjoy with strength and grace. Morning light filtered softly through the curtains as Leo opened his eyes. The familiar heaviness in his limbs, the stiffness that had been his unwelcome companion for years, felt diminished, replaced by a gentle steadiness. He lay there for a moment, breathing deeply, feeling the quiet strength returning to his body. It had taken time, weeks really, but Leo knew this newfound strength was the result of his small, consistent nighttime habits. The cottage cheese, eggs, tuna, Greek yogurt, golden turmeric milk, almond butter, tart cherry juice, and the protein shake, all woven together into a tapestry of care that now supported his muscles while he slept. Rising from bed, Leo felt the difference keenly. His steps were surer, his joints more pliant. Tasks that once demanded effort, climbing the stairs, reaching for the top shelf, felt easier. He smiled quietly, grateful for this subtle but profound shift. He thought back to the early days of his journey when muscle loss had felt inevitable, a silent thief stealing strength in the night. Now each morning was a small victory, proof that he could reclaim control. That day, Leo decided to visit the park where he often walked. The crisp air filled his lungs as he moved steadily along the path. He noticed the birdsong, the rustle of leaves, and the warmth of the sun on his face, appreciating these simple pleasures with renewed vigor. Along the way, he greeted familiar faces, neighbors and friends, who remarked on his improved posture and brighter demeanor. Leo felt a quiet pride, but also humility, knowing the strength was a gift nurtured through patience and care. Later, as he sat with Anne sipping tea, Leo shared his thoughts. "I never imagined that such small changes could make such a difference. It's like waking up from a long sleep, not just the night's rest, but the sleep of neglect." Anne reached for his hand. "You've done the hard work, Leo. You've listened to your body and given it what it needs. That's real strength." Leo realized that strength wasn't just physical, it was the courage to change, the persistence to keep going, and the wisdom to honor himself through the process. That night, as he prepared for bed, Leo felt a deep sense of peace. The habits he had formed were no longer chores, but acts of self-love, promises made and kept with each passing evening. He closed his eyes, trusting his body to continue its quiet work of repair and renewal. The journey wasn't over, but he was ready, stronger, wiser, and filled with hope for the days ahead. Leo sat quietly in his favorite armchair, the soft glow of the evening lamp casting gentle shadows around the room. The journey he'd been on felt like a tapestry woven with patience, persistence, and care, each thread representing a small change, a nightly choice that added up to real strength. He thought back to the first time he noticed the heaviness in his legs, that slow, silent muscle loss that crept in during sleep. It had felt overwhelming, even a little frightening, but through his commitment to learning and listening to his body, Leo discovered that aging didn't have to mean surrender. The nightly rituals, the cottage cheese with banana, the hard-boiled eggs, the tuna in olive oil, Greek yogurt with berries, golden turmeric milk, almond butter on toast, tart cherry juice, and the protein shake had become more than just foods. They were symbols of hope and action, tools that empowered him to protect his muscles while he rested. Each night, as Leo prepared his chosen snack, he felt a quiet connection to his body. These moments were no longer hurried or thoughtless. They were intentional acts of self-care, a promise to himself that he was worth the effort. He realized that the path to staying strong wasn't about grand gestures or perfection. It was about consistent, manageable steps taken with kindness and awareness. Some nights he varied his snacks, other nights he stuck to favorites. What mattered most was the commitment to nourish and protect. Leo's story wasn't unique, and he hoped others could find the same encouragement he had. Aging might bring challenges, but it also offered opportunities to learn, to adapt, and to thrive in new ways. He often thought of his neighbors and friends, sharing his journey gently, inviting them to consider their own nightly habits. The response was heartening. Many embraced small changes and found their own strength renewed. As Leo prepared for bed one last time in this chapter of his journey, he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the knowledge he had gained, the support of Anne and Dr. Patel, and the resilience within himself. He closed his eyes, confident in the path he had chosen, a path that honored his body, celebrated his progress, and held promise for the future. Each night offered a chance to rest, to heal, and to grow stronger, and Leo was ready to meet it, one peaceful evening at a time. Granted, but through patience and care, he transformed that quiet decline into a powerful opportunity for renewal. From the first hesitant bite of cottage cheese to embracing eggs, tuna in olive oil, Greek yogurt, golden turmeric milk, almond butter, tart cherry juice, and finally, the nourishing protein shake, Leo learned that small, intentional choices could spark big changes. Each night, as he fed his body the right nutrients, his muscles found the fuel to repair, rebuild, and grow stronger. The stiffness that once greeted his mornings softened, his steps grew steadier, and with each passing day, Leo reclaimed not just his strength, but his confidence, independence, and joy. His story is a gentle reminder. Aging is not a surrender to loss, but a call to care deeper for ourselves. It's never too late to begin, to honor your body, to nourish your muscles, and to embrace the power of consistent, simple habits. To everyone watching, especially those over 60, remember this: strength doesn't fade overnight unless you let it. You have the power to stop the silent thief and rebuild your body from within. Start tonight. Choose one small habit. Feed your muscles as you rest. Wake up stronger every day, because your best years are not behind you. They're waiting in every new morning you greet with care and hope.